Okay, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on when you're listening to this presentation. Okay, so my name is Victor, and I'm going to be your anchor for today's training. We started looking at ethical hacking, penetration testing, what are the different stages, what do you need to do if you have to plan out your penetration testing. I'll look at about the 4 or 5 steps. You have to first plan. Once you're done planning, you start up with reconnaissance and footprinting. You start enumeration, your attack tools, and in module 4, we want to look at penetration testing tools. So what are those kind of tools that we need to use if we are to conduct penetration testing? Penetration testing tools. So one of the tools that we're going to use from time to time is NMRP. So you use NMRP to conduct information gathering. What are the kind of things you're going to get if you're running NMRP on a network? So it's a network mapper. So you have things like IP address, you have things like shares, things like open ports, closed ports. Ports, I mean, line of communications like port 80, port 53, UDP, port, typically all of the ports you have within your system. So if a port is open, it then means there's a particular application that is using that port. Simply put, for instance, if you have NMAP scanning a network and a particular system, a particular IP have port 25 open, it then means that the system is using SMTP, that's a simple mail transfer protocol, right? So that particular system is using that particular protocol. So you want to start comparing and contrasting between various tools. It doesn't mean that you're going to be using all of the tools you see over the internet or in your arsenal, in your box. So the particular scenario that you have will tell you which type of tool you're going to be using. Now, you want to analyze the tools and what kind of output you have, especially because there are some tools that you're going to be using, they are based, or you use them based out of the content or the output you have from other tools. For instance, if you have to do password cracking, you have to first collect your hashed password, try to see if you could prepare a dictionary. If you're going to be doing injections, you have to first get your pre-computed susceptible SQL commands that you're going to use. Or if you want to do, if you have to do upload bombing, maybe let's say on a web application, you have to first get the files you're going to use to do that. So the thing about using tools is that you have to prepare, you have to analyze what are you going to do, what input do you need for a particular tool. For instance, if you're going to use a tool like Wireshark for sniffing, it then means that first you have to understand what IP address of which particular system is of interest to you. So, so it then means you have to use something like a NMAP or any topology mapper. Once you get all of that, or use simply run your ARP commands, your address resolution protocol commands, either on a Linux system or in a Windows system. Once you run that, whatever IP address you have there, you can now map it to the systems that is of interest to you. Once you are now monitoring on a tool like Wireshark, then everything starts getting clearer. So what kind of questions can I expect? Okay, I've talked about this in previous videos. NMAP usage. NMAP is a command line tool that sends specially crafted packets to the target host. Helps you discover host services being run based on a response. Like the goal of these about 7 series I'm doing on pen testing is to lay the foundation of what you need to know as a pen tester. In subsequent playlists, I'm going to be doing the labs and the hands-on for all of the things we've discussed. So it's good you follow through so that when it's now time for us to run the tools, we'll just pick the tools and we demonstrate as earlier explained. Okay, so these are some of the NMRP switches. So port scan result, if it's open, it then means an application is running. So if NMAP tells you, oh, I see a port open, That's one of the reasons why you need to understand some of the theory behind the tools you are using. You don't just pick up a tool and somebody trying to learn penetration testing might just feel, oh, I just want to go to YouTube, get a video, or go to a website, get a video, just start using the tool. It's good you understand what the tool is meant to do, why the tool is doing what it's doing. Do you need any other tool before that particular tool? What are the outputs you're going to have? What inputs does the tool need? And how do you interpret the result of the tools, right? It's very critical. So once you do that, I normally say you have a 33% you understanding knowledge base, understanding how, where, when, why. If you understand all of those whys, then your another 33% is you trying to understand how to use your tools, how to use your techniques, how to use tricks, how to use tips. Then I normally say another 33% is for how do you understand countermeasures? Because the goal of a pen tester is not just to run tools, right? Your goal as a pen tester is not to run 101 tools. Your goal is partly to run those tools, but you need to understand why you're running the tools. That is the first 33%. Then you having mastery of the tools is very critical and very important. But as you can see, it's just 33% of the game. Then lastly, the last 33%, which brings everything to 99%, is you being able to understand countermeasures, interpretation. How does this adapt to a corporate environment, a corporate organization, an individual to help secure a system? What are those things I need to do to help better secure the system? Or what advice am I going to be giving to my client, right? So knowing how to use the tools, very, very awesome. But that's not the end of the road. So if you see a port is closed, it then means no application is listening on that port. If you see port 80 closed, it then means that maybe no browser is running, no application is pinging the internet and the rest. But if you see that port open, it then means, yes, I have an application running, an application listening, right? Of course, so you have filtered probes aren't reaching the port, usually indicated by a firewall. You might have either a soft wire firewall or a hardware firewall being implemented. Then you might see filtered or you might see unreachable. Then, of course, there are some NMRP switches. If you're writing the CompTIA PenTest exam that you want to be aware of, you want to know. So you have the sync, you have the TCP scan, you have the, when you're trying to specify the port to scan, and you override all the other defaults. -O when you want to do OS detection, or what we call OS fingerprinting. The -PN when you want to skip post discovery. The -IL when you want to scan from a particular text file. Then of course -T when you want to set a particular time to the scan that you're running. Now, this is very important if you want to do a stealth scan. Like in the previous explanation, I said the military will normally say a covert operation. So, but pen testers or cybersecurity experts will normally say a stealth operation or a stealth scan. So that kind of scan you want to run so that your firewall does not detect that particular action. So you could add this switch to your scan to indicate how stealthily or how paranoid you want your scan to be. For instance, using a -T0, that's quite paranoid. It's not going to easily be detected, or rather will easily be detected because you're kind of paranoid, you're kind of making a lot of noise. But done that way, if you have T0, T1, T2, T3, T4, T5, right? So this is sneaky, polite. These are just names just to show hierarchy. Are we there? Okay, so you have quite a lot of them. You could check nmap.org. You have a full documentation, and maybe in the video I will drop a link to a sheet I documented that's on the website for you to see other switches that you could run to help you master running nmap. Okay, there's a demo. I'm going to do a demo later on in another playlist This is just how you could set up a scan. This is a router, this is a switch. You could be running a scan from here to this particular network. Okay, use case for tools. So what do you use all of these tools to do? Now, you need to align the tools to the different stage of hack or the different stage of penetration testing. Like I said earlier on, you don't just use the tools for use sake. You have to align them to your plan, to your game plan, to your strategy, to the sequence of events you're carrying out. So when you're trying to do reconnaissance and footprinting, what are the kind of tools you could use? So these tools are used to collect information before attacking the IT system, right? So we said you cannot attack what you don't have knowledge about. So if you cannot attack something, for instance, you want to visit somebody, you need to first have the address of that particular person. You need to have the email address of that person. Now, if you want to attack someone, you don't just go attacking everywhere. You have to first get information about the person's house. Same thing for a particular person or email or a website. You first need to understand and know what that email is or what that website is. You first start talking about, okay, I want to know what the password is. So that's why reconnaissance is very critical. That is the first stage. So it just to do like the normal spy, like a spy agent will normally just go around, see where are the exit points, know where the buildings are, know this, know that. Without that very critical stage, war veterans, they told stories of how they go invade a country. If you have to go invade a country, one of the first things you want to do is to have your map. That's why you need geography skills, you need map reading skills, you need to be able to know your streets, where do I get in, where do I get out from, if I'm caught, what are my escape routes. That's what reconnaissance is all about. So what are the kind of tools you could use to do that? So you have WHOIS, NSLOOKUP, the harvester. WHOIS is going to give you whois.com. So WHOIS is going to give you the IP address of the website, for instance, or the IP address of the website. It's going to give you who created it, where is it from, where is it hosted, all of those kind of details. NSLOOKUP, same thing. Harvester, you could use that to grab email address. Showdown, same thing. ReconNG, same thing. Census, same thing. ECRAC-NG, you could use that for wireless reconnaissance. So ECRAC-NG is going, ECRAC-NG, Kismet, Wi-Fi. There are tools in Kali Linux box. If you run these tools, what they are going to do for you, they will tell you, for instance, if you want to crack a wireless router, you need to understand what encryption method is the router using. If it's WPA2, it's a little bit more harder to crack. If it's using web, for instance, it means it's much more easier to crack. So you should understand the battle you're against before you start trying to say, I am fully ready or I'm not ready. So ECRAC-NG, Kismet, Wi-Fi, they are all tools you could use in Kali Linux box to do some basic reconnaissance. You could see what your bandwidth strength is. You could see what encryption method that particular Wi-Fi signal have, and the rest. Wireshark. So you could use Wireshark to see most of the things between your first 2-3 layers in your OSI model. So the OSI model is the Open System Interconnect. I normally say, please do not take sweet potatoes alone. I love sweet potatoes. So if you take sweet potatoes alone, you're not my friend. So please do not take sweet potatoes alone. Physical layer, data link layer, transport layer. Please do not, or rather, physical layer. I'm trying not to go off my. Okay, let me use Notepad. I hope you can still see my screen. So you say, please do not take sweet potatoes. Is it potatoes or potatoes? Potatoes alone, right? So physical So normally the OSI model, we read the OSI model bottom to top. So physical, data link layer, network layer, transport layer, session layer, potatoes. Potatoes will be presentation layer. If you like potatoes, comment in the section below. Presentation layer, and application layer. Right, so this is what I call the OSI model, the very foundation for other TCP/IP suite. So what Wireshark will do for you is at least you're able to see up to this point most times, and in few times, if you're sniffing through HTTP or FTP, most times you're able to sniff up to the application layer, right? So that's what Wireshark can do for you. Then, of course, you have HPing. HPing will get you, it could help you to craft packets and send, to be able to also get information about your host or the particular IP address. Same thing with set is social engineering toolkit, then NMRP, then Metasploit, and the rest. I talked about NMRP. Then Metasploit is a framework that has quite a lot of vulnerabilities. I could use it to test other operating system, web applications, and the rest. So reconnaissance is your very first stage. So these are the type of tools you could use to carry out that. So once you've understood why you need to do reconnaissance, next thing you want to understand is what are the tools I can use to do reconnaissance. Then lastly, you want to ask yourself, what are the countermeasures I need to know in order to stop any attack that I would have had. Now, I said 33%, 33%, 33%. I have 1% left. It's intentional. The thing is that you cannot have a 100% secured system. So no matter what you do, there is always residual risks. Enumeration, I've talked about enumeration. That's your second step. Here, you're trying to enumerate. You're trying to count. You're trying to get your second layer. And basic things you want to get from this stage in enumeration is things like usernames, shares, and the rest. Then, of course, vulnerability scanning. What are the tools you could use? NICTO, OpenVAS, Nexus, SQL Map, WAF, W3AF, OAP-ZAP, NMAP, Metasploit framework. Some of the tools I've used here very frequently and I love so much is OpenVAS, Nexus, SQL Map, and OAP-ZAP, right? Very, very awesome tools with respect to web application vulnerability scanning. Then you have credentials attack. When you need to get things like passwords, I've used SQL Map a lot, John the Ripper, Minicats, Cain and Abel, AirCrack-NG for wireless cracking or hacking. But the thing about AirCrack-NG and any other wireless cracking tools is that, like I said in previous presentation, your password have to be a weak password for passwords that are not long enough, for password that use either WEP or WPA, not WPA2. Those are more patched encryption methodology, and it's going to be very, very difficult. You could spend a whole day without having access. But if somebody uses a very low integrity password, the password without a lot of strength, of course, most of these tools, they will get it down. Then, of course, SQL Map is for databases. If you have a website and application that runs any of the databases, MySQL, MongoDB, Postgre, Oracle, MySQL Server, any of those databases, most of them are going to run, they're going to use, you could use SQL, that's structured query language, to query those databases while you're trying to perform CRUD operations. That is create, read, update, delete. For the fact that somebody can actually query those databases, it then means that a tool like SQL Map can also run those queries. So if someone creates a site that is not that secured, that runs any of these databases, it then means that SQL Map will be able to, through brute forcing, gather most of those details. Then you have persistence, then you have configuration compliance, you have evasion. So these are tools. You see, they are organized in terms of the use cases, right? So reconnaissance, enumeration, vulnerability scanning, credentials attack, persistence, configuration compliance, evasion. Let me talk about configuration compliance. Now, in previous slides, I talked about you doing pen testing for particular reasons, right? You don't just carry out a pen test without a reason most times. We talked about compliance, we talked about regulation, we talked about when an organization have a need or where you have a merger between 2-3 companies. So you have to make sure that you're not joining old soup or old wine to new wine. So you want to make sure that at both sides they are clean before you merge them together. Technology integration, or where you are doing some API integration. So you want to make sure that all of the ends you are putting together, they are clean. So these are some of the reasons why you want to run some of these tools. So once you run these tools, the output they give to you will now tell you if you are actually meeting security baselines and policies. So if you don't meet them, it's that time for you to now patch up those things so that, of course, in your report, you can now report that, yes, from these screenshots, from these scans I have done, I've actually met security baselines. Security baselines are typically just benchmarks, things that are minimum requirements that you should meet. So if an application is not meeting those requirements, of course, it's not safe. Decompilation, forensics, debugging, which am I going to talk about? So you have for the compilation where you want to have a particular software, decompile it, that is open it up. And most of the times they don't do it so well. It's just an estimate to what the programmer actually compiled. So it's not, you don't do the compilation having in mind that you're going to have exactly what the programmer actually compiled. No, it's just an estimate. It's just to serve as a means for you to now go on to do further investigation. Then for forensics, you want to analyze evidence. So forensic is another topic altogether. I think I have a presentation on that. But you cannot do pen testing without talking about forensics, because at times when you're doing pen testing, there might be need for you to gather evidence. So there are several tools you could use to do that, from foremost FTK, NK's, Tableau. I use FTK and Tableau a lot. So Tableau, you use Tableau for most of the times to do your presentation, to do your reporting. Then of course, FTK used to do gather digital evidence either from flash drives, from phones, from they operate the same market with NK's. You could use them to do memory analysis. You could dump files from a memory. If you run the tool, you want to know what's happening within my memory while the system is starting up. So you could dump that and now analyze. Especially if you have malwares that are rootkits or malwares that are boot sector type of malwares. So when you do memory analysis, because they are going to run at boot time, you're able to capture that, get their signature, get their depending any of the hash values. Then you can now look it up to things like virus total, things like what's this site again? Pest Studio. So there are other tools you could use in conjunction with your forensic tools, so that once you've gotten a particular evidence, you've gotten the hash value, or you've gotten the signature, you can now look it up. Once you look it up, of course, don't forget, for every known attack that we have, there's always threat intelligence around it. So threat intelligence is always built around what has happened in the time past. So because most of these malware, most of these crimes, most of these things that happen, they reoccur. So if it's happening to you today, doesn't mean that's the first time it's happening. So that's why forensic is always an aftermath of a crime. So forensic is not a kind of a defensive strategy in terms of cybersecurity. Forensic is always offensive. It's always at the end of the event when all of the stuff has happened. So you now want to gather evidence. Once you gather evidence, so that you can understand who caused it, why, when was the first time this happened. So you can get all of those information from threat intelligence. So you could look up from the hash value that you have elsewhere. So once you now compare to what you have, you cannot be able to make a case and say, oh, this is coming from a particular country. This IP address is from a particular country. Oh, it has happened so place. You can also even check up things like the common variability exposure database. So once you check all of that, you can now make a valid conclusion. Why you're trying to do forensics is so that you could know causatives, correlations. You could know why something happened, and so that you can forestall that kind of thing from happening. The compilation, a little bit synonymous to debugging, but kind of different. The goal is kind of similar, but you see the approach now is always quite different. So these are some of the tools you could use to do that. Okay, software assurance. So when you want to be sure of what you're doing, when you want to be sure, same thing as baseline, security baseline, right? These are some reasons why you also want to do that. Software assurance. So you could use any of these to carry out your test. And your test can be static, it can be dynamic. It's static when you are carrying out a test for, let's say, a file. You have a file, let's say a PDF document, or you have a template you want to use to build a website, or you have a Python script that you want to use to create a network topology, or you have something, you have it static, right? Then you want to run analysis of that particular file, or that particular template, or that particular document. That is what you call a kind of a static analysis. Dynamic will mean when you're running on the go. Things like memory analysis, things like network analysis, all of those kind of analysis, you classify them under dynamic security testing. Okay, so you have some other scanners like SQL Map, Nikto, OpenVAS, Nessus. Then credentials, we talked about this, all of this. We've talked about this. So this is now explanation of each of those tools we talked about here. Yes, each of these tools, it's now being explained here. So I've offered most of these explanations. This software assurance, this OSINT, open source intelligence gathering, very nice tools, part of the Kali Linux operating system. This is used for file harvesting, metadata. If you have a website where you don't have the directories actually sessioned out, if the developer did not make sure that the application, there is access control. So you can do directory transversal, meaning you could just move directories backward and you could still have access to the file without permission. The Fokker can grab most of those documents. We've talked about this, Crack NG, Kismet, Wi-Fi. I've talked about OABZAP. OABZAP for web applications, mostly OABZAP and BobSuite. I prefer OABZAP, it's open source. BobSuite, they have a premium version. Then channel generator toolkit. I've talked about the networking tools, Wireshark, HPing, then RATs, then for mobile, then several other tools. You have your searchploit, parsploit, responder, and packet. Okay, that will be all for the tools. So you have an idea about the tools, why you need to use the tools, what does the tools, what do they do? and at what time should you be using them? Okay, that'll be all. See you in Module 5.